don't sweat it. We're about to break off and go west anyway, towards Cascadia.
Cascadia?
Haven't you heard? Civil war against the Federation. Some rogue Cascadian ambassador's been island hopping, dropping off contracts and information all day. Yeah, the rebels need mercs, and I need a job. Master Goose 1, out.
This is Project Wingman, a plane-based action game that started out as an Ace Combat fan game and is now a genuine competitor to it. It looks like a game that might require a lot of technical knowledge, but it really doesn't. They want you in the air fast. Project Wingman looks pretty good, especially for a small dev team. Terrain is varied from level to level, but for the most part it takes place in mountain ranges and coastal areas given the region portrayed. Wingman also isn't afraid to get creative with some levels, even having a boss fight over a volcano. Some of the texture work can look a bit muddy, but since everything is moving so fast, you only really notice it in the hangar screen. Most importantly, all the planes are modeled correctly, even if their names aren't. I imagine they changed the names to dodge copyright, but in 2020, the courts finally settled the 2017 AMG versus Activision case. They essentially said that because Activision wasn't trying to sell military vehicles and was trying to have a military theme in their game, it was legal to use the likeness of a Humvee in the Call of Duty games without requiring permission from the IP holder. So I think Project Wingman would be fine to use the likeness and names of the jets. Going back to the game, the soundtrack is really special to me. A lot of games use orchestral soundtracks, but few of them really stick out in my mind, fading into the endless background of action drums and horns. Wingman has a wonderful mix of classical orchestral arrangements with a bit of electric flavor and even some rock, making for a varied but cohesive soundtrack. More than just being a good soundtrack for aerial combat, it has emotional impact when it needs to. Coronation, one of the final songs in the game, often hits me like a gut punch, but that's spoilers. The sounds in the game are also well made, even if they reuse more than a few sounds. All the missiles sound the same when fired, and most of the blasts, save some plot relevant ones, use the same sound too. Since you're flying by so fast, you usually don't notice this since the sound mixing is pretty good. If you're here for plain ASMR though, I'm afraid you'll need to look elsewhere. All the RWR and missile lock sounds are the exact same across all planes. This is done on purpose for gameplay, so you don't have to spend time figuring out what the new missile beep sounds like every time you get a new plane. Speaking of gameplay, it's only a simulation of aerial combat in the sense that you're in a jet-shaped object doing something that could be called dogfighting. This is not a game for you if you're somebody who cares about accurate flight models, realistically modeled avionics, or all that other nerd stuff. This is a game concerned only with being a Top Gun simulator and making you feel like a cool guy in a plane. You start with a few trainer jets and start getting access to more planes as you progress. Since you're a mercenary, you're paid by the target, so the end score screen tells you how much money you made. Kill more, pay more. Got it? This pay you use to actually unlock the planes you get access to, and every plane has different stats and weapon loadouts. There's another plane stat too, the seat count, which dictates if you have Prez or not with her extra dialogue. But I just mod the game to have her in every plane, so I don't need to compromise my loadouts. Speaking of loadouts, every single plane has some variation on what they can mount on top of their standard missiles, which can attack all targets. The special weapons vary from extra gun pods, more standard missiles, anti-air only missiles, anti-ground only missiles, and the variants of those last three, along with some extra special weapons. Now that you know everything that can be shot at you, I'll take a moment to tell you about how to avoid getting shot. Your first and most important tool is your Radar Warning Receiver, or RWR. It's the thing that beeps whenever a missile is in flight at you. You will always have this, and it will show you the path a missile is taking to you, allowing you to dodge it. If you don't think you can dodge a missile, you have two choices. Your first choice are the flares. Unlike real life, it breaks all missile locks. Finally, your last defensive option is the angle of attack, or AOA limiter. This is a thing in real life. Where it differs though is planes and pilots can only handle so many Gs, so you can use this thing in scenarios that would rip your wings off in a plane if it were real. This disables your AOA limiter on a push button like the system found in some real planes like the Sukhoi 27 and the Sukhoi 33. What this does is it allows you to adjust your pitch in a way that would ordinarily be limited for safety reasons. With all that, Wingman has two game modes, Campaign and Conquest. Campaign is just the story mode, but Conquest mode is a little different. While it uses all the same levels as the campaign, you get to choose which territory to strike, and they all have roguelike modifiers to add replay value. On top of having to buy your own planes, you also hire new pilots and even get to buy airships for your fleet. There's a threat mechanic where the more aggressive you are and the longer you survive, the more dangerous the enemy becomes. Finally, this is all brought together with permadeath. Unless you alt F4 the game before it says mission failed. Project Wingman also supports a diverse range of controllers, all your normal gamepads, keyboard and mouse, VR, head trackers, and my most favorite, full HOTAS support. So what's the game about? Wingman takes place 200 years in the future after the Ring of Fire blew up in an event known as the Calamity. All of this is detailed in the in-game Files menu, which acts like a study guide for the setting. The Calamity brought a special sci-fi mineral called cordium up to the crust from the deep mantle, which in real life is still not well understood. This allowed mankind to build back quicker, and the Federation was the first group, I think China most likely, to organize itself and other reformed nations to begin building back to pre-calamity levels. Please note, I'm only referencing the geography of these areas. Hundreds of years have passed, so they're not the same nations. With that setup, we begin in the Creole Republic, where Sicario, the mercenary outfit you're in, learns of a job in Cascadia.
Don't sweat it. We're about to break off and go west anyway, towards Cascadia.
Cascadia is formerly the west coast of the entire North American continent, and desires to break away from the Federation because of overexploitation. By the way, Cascadia was a real thing, with the same kind of idea, except it was localized within the Pacific Northwest region of the United States. They only signed a charter, and nothing really came of it, but it did exist, and people like my grandma signed it, so it can be said that I'm a genuine Cascadian. In Wingman, though, Cascadia puts a call out for mercenary forces to join their war of independence from the Federation. From here on out, I'll be going into detail on the specific events of the conflict and spoiling the story. If you want to skip that, click to the timecode on screen now. In the intermission here, I want to take a moment to show what actual aerial combat can look like. I feel most people lack reference for just how difficult this is, and just how easy Wingman and other games can make it look. In this section of footage, Stroke 3 over Iraq has had a mechanical failure. His chaff and flare dispensers are not operative. He is now placed in a bad situation where he has to dodge between 6 to 7 surface-to-air missiles using only the energy of his plane. The F-16's engine can't restore enough energy after a turn, so he has to trade altitude for energy. While this enables him to dodge the missiles, it brings him closer to the SAMs that are firing at him. Thankfully, Stroke 3 had some attentive wingmen that day who gave him vital callouts to more accurately evade the missiles. Stroke 3 and all other pilots survived this action, even the 2 who were shot down. Stroke 3 is Major Emmett Tulia. He was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for this action, maintaining an average of 3.4 Gs during the entire action, sometimes peaking to 6.4 Gs. Major Tulia pushed his body to the limit just to survive. You quickly get to work in Cascadia. Before you're even properly in country, the Federation is performing air intercepts along the border. After eliminating these air patrols and their reinforcements, you meet with your Cascadian liaison, Stardust, who tasks you with securing the airbase you'll be operating from.
When hostilities took off, however, the Federation seized the base from the National Guard. Your objective today is to take back the base into our hands.
The war does not start well for Cascadia, as they were hoping for a peaceful exit from the Federation. In the opening days of the war, their forces are scattered, and they're on the brink of total breakdown, so much so that the entire capital of Presidia had to be abandoned. After covering the Cascadians retreating from Presidia, they can regroup and mount proper counteroffensives. A series of surgical strikes disabling critical assets such as in-country cordium sources, along with comms and jamming arrays, forces the Federation into a retreat. In a desperate bid to save manpower and material, the Federation attempts to extract the rest of their forces to Magadan, where the mother of all battles occurs in Mission 11. Over the Bering Strait, the Federation and Cascadia commit all their air power in a single all-or-nothing, knockdown, drag-out brawl. This is the coolest part of the game. All the dry Tom Clancy stuff, it led up to this. The furball to end all furballs. You completely wipe out all active Federation air power in the region, requiring them to take weeks to reorganize and redeploy more fighter squadrons. During this mission is when Frontline 59 starts, but I'll cover that in detail later on after I finish the primary plot. After gaining the upper hand, Cascadia decides it's time to retake Prospero, a strategically important city. During the operation, due to the losses sustained, the Federation decides to make use of its secret weapon. Going back to the events in the Creole Republic at the beginning for a second, Sicario was tasked with a cover-up operation by the Federation. The Maylinks incident had a tanker containing cordium previously thought to be unsuitable for weapons use violently explode. It was a Federation tanker containing experimental cordium warheads that were stolen by pirates thinking it was just regular cordium. It's these warheads that the Federation has launched at Prospero. Shout out to the one Federation officer who gave his life challenging this insane order, though.
Stand down. I will let you carry out these orders. Captain Flowers, that's your name, right? If we don't show the rebels absolute terror, we will lose this war. Step aside. Over my dead body. I will be the officer responsible for making this call. Stand down, Captain. You're gonna have to kill me.
Prospero was struck so hard, it triggered a second Calamity-like event that caused all forces to retreat from the area immediately. After killing some foul mercenaries who sold you out, Stardust contacts Sicario, offering them the deal to finish the war. It's sorta like the briefcase in Pulp Fiction. It works best as a plot device when it's left up to your own imagination, but whatever it is, it's very important. After a few more jobs and some regrouping, Sicario and the Cascadians are finally ready to retake Presidia, the capital. Right as the Federation agrees to a cessation of hostilities, Crimson One uses another cordium warhead to destroy Presidia without approval from the Federation.
You're slaves to history. Even after calamity, you fight against the only order that can guarantee the safety of your people. You solely are responsible for this.
A lot of people talk about Crimson One rather dismissively. I think this is for the same reason the plot of the Ghost in the Shell game can be lost on some people. There's an optional word list that I talked about earlier, which goes into some pretty big historical events for the setting, and they do expect you to read that. Oceania, mentioned in some dialogue offhandedly, but not really detailed, was the former landmass of Australia, and was a partner to the Federation, but after their geothermal resources were overexploited, they withdrew. Look, I get this is a lot of dry stuff, but I need to explain just a little bit more. The Federation, not liking this outcome, invaded Oceania, hoping for a quick victory, but was met with fierce resistance, made up primarily of mercenary forces. As I explained earlier in the non-spoiler segment, Cascadia is now at war with the Federation for the exact same reasons. It's with this we understand Crimson One's first line at the start of his final fight. He views you as just another merc, like Oceania, and if he escalates this conflict enough, eventually you will break. Presumably this is what the Federation did in Oceania, but it didn't go on long enough to escalate to weapons of mass destruction. Crimson One was following what he thought was the logical conclusion and escalation, while having been pushed to the limit of his sanity and his ability. After explaining why he's doing what he's doing, Monarch defeats him, and Crimson has one final request. This is when Coronation plays, and despite the name it sounds like a funeral, and it rips my fucking heart out every time I hear it, and I feel like in another life, we could have been friends. and the DLC that came to PC this month, but it's been on PlayStation 5 since 2023, you're almost given that chance on a couple of occasions. They're short cameos really, but it's nice to get some extra dialogue where you're not fighting Crimson 1. Instead of Monarch, you're Magadan reservist K9 Alpha, aka Driver.
I drive?
I burst out laughing the moment I heard that, so my entire first run I was distracted because I kept imagining Ryan Gosling in a fighter jet. Magadan is a Federation nation in the former landmass of Russia, who were bottom-of-the-barrel reservists tasked with covering the retreating forces from the Bering Strait. General Faust of Cascadia, seeing the opportunity to strike with the Federation's air power crippled, launches an invasion into Magadan. Driver and his wingmen are forced to repel the invasion, but never resort to drastic measures that endanger anyone other than Federation pilots. After a pretty cool mission through an unfinished underground highway, it's discovered what Faust's plans are. She's trying to push as far into Magadan as possible to cripple geothermal power production. Faust fought with Cascadian forces at Oceania and knows exactly the history Crimson One spoke of. She's attempting to cripple the Federation's response before they can respond after the conflict and break out of history's cycle. Faust explains that while in Oceania they found something terrible that all mercenaries would consider holy, and Cascadia may be forced to use it. With some more information from the files menu, specifically the Cat Eye spy ship pilot entry and the mercenary cabal entries, I believe that what Cascadia found and then gave to Sicario was the proof of office for the mercenary cabal. The mercenary cabal during Oceania and before was a group of people who controlled all mercenaries globally and were the ones to convince Oceania to break away from the Federation. The Cat Eye was in Cascadia to investigate rumors about the mercenary cabal, so there was enough suspicion that even the Federation thinks the Cascadians might be in contact or possession of them. Taking us back to the ending of the main game, this would explain why Cascadia becomes a mercenary hub like Oceania intended. If you beat the game on mercenary difficulty, the hardest in the game, you get some extra dialogue confirming a few things. A, your wingmen survive. B, the Cascadians think you nuked Presidia, and C, Sicario is going into hiding while trying to convince Cascadia that it wasn't them. This last reason is also most likely why the Cascadian military police are looking for any members of Hitman Team, either to apprehend them or to confirm the story. Project Wingman is a great game, made with a lot of love and passion for the niche of action-playing games. While some people dismiss its story as over the top, it's no less crazy than an Ace Combat game that read a little too much Tom Clancy. It accomplishes what it sets out to do, and that's make you feel like the coolest thing in a plane since Stroke 3, and I love it. Unlike other flight games like Microsoft Flight Sim or DCS, the game is unconcerned with all the jargon and just wants to get you being cool in a plane ASAP. All this for about $30 if you include the DLC. I think this makes the game worth your time, and who knows, you might end up loving planes too. Leave your comments, questions, or recommendations down below or by email. Thanks for watching, and Merry Christmas!